November 24, 1971. The day before Thanksgiving, Portland International Airport is packed. Tired travelers shuffle through lines. Security is almost non-existent. No ID checks, no bag scanners, just a boarding pass, a smile, and you're on the plane. A man walks up to the ticket counter. Dark suit, black tie, sunglasses, a briefcase in hand. He gives the name Dan Cooper and pays in cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle. He boards Northwest Orient Flight 305, just another passenger on a short 30-minute flight. He takes a seat in the rear of the cabin. Quiet, calm, unremarkable. Shortly after takeoff, he hands a folded note to a flight attendant. She assumes it's a phone number and pockets it. The man leans in and speaks 4 quiet words. "Miss, you'd better read that." Inside the note, a bomb threat and a set of demands. $200,000 in unmarked bills, 4 parachutes, a fuel truck waiting on the runway in Seattle, and no funny business. The plane circles for nearly 2 hours as the FBI scrambles to meet his terms. At 5:24 p.m. the money and parachutes are delivered. He lets the passengers go. The plane refuels. Then he gives the next set of instructions. Fly south toward Mexico. Maintain 10,000 feet. Keep the flaps down. Fly slow. Somewhere over Washington state, in the freezing dark, with rain hammering the fuselage, he lowers the rear stairwell and jumps. No one sees him land. No body is found. No parachute. No trace. All that remains is a legend. A name. D.B. Cooper. For decades, the FBI insisted he acted alone. But what if he didn't? What if this was never a solo job? What if it was a carefully coordinated operation, planned, timed, and executed by a crew who vanished just as cleanly as the man in the suit? This is the story of Flight 305, and how it became the perfect crime. Flight 305 was a routine trip, just a 30-minute hop from Portland to Seattle. On board were 36 passengers and 6 crew members, flying a Boeing 727-100. It was the kind of flight no one thought twice about, until Dan Cooper changed everything. Witnesses described him as calm, polite, even charming. He ordered a bourbon and soda and waited until the plane was airborne before making his move. That's when he handed flight attendant Florence Schaffner a note. The note claimed he had a bomb in his briefcase, and when she hesitated, he opened it just enough to reveal wires, red cylinders, and a battery. It looked convincing. Real or not, it didn't matter. He had control. Cooper's demands were clear. $200,000 in small bills, 4 parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve, a fuel truck waiting in Seattle to refuel the plane, and absolutely no tricks from law enforcement. As Flight 305 circled Seattle, the FBI scrambled to gather the money and parachutes. Passengers were kept unaware of what was happening. Most thought it was a routine delay. Meanwhile, on the ground, agents coordinated a response but made no move to storm the plane. At 5:24 p.m., the aircraft landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Cooper exchanged the passengers for the ransom and parachutes. He kept the flight crew aboard. Once the plane refueled, he instructed the pilots to take off again. The destination, Mexico City. But he was very specific about the conditions. Keep the plane under 10,000 feet. Maintain a speed of 170 knots. Landing gear down. Cabin unpressurized. And keep the rear stair mechanism unlocked. The plane took off again just after 7:30 p.m. heading south into the stormy night. Somewhere over southwestern Washington, the cabin crew noticed a shift in air pressure. The rear stair had been lowered. D.B. Cooper was gone. The FBI launched one of the most extensive manhunts in U.S. history. Military helicopters and ground teams scoured the forests below the flight path. Rivers were searched. Surveillance was increased along the borders. But they found nothing. No parachute, no body, no trace. In 1980, 9 years later, a young boy camping with his family found 3 bundles of weathered $20 bills buried along the Columbia River. They totaled $5,800. The serial numbers matched the ransom money. It was the only physical evidence ever recovered. The rest of the money and the man who took it had vanished. Flight 305 was a routine trip, just a 30-minute hop from Portland to Seattle. On board were 36 passengers and 6 crew members, flying a Boeing 727-100. It was the kind of flight no one thought twice about, until Dan Cooper changed everything. Witnesses described him as calm, polite, even charming. He ordered a bourbon and soda and waited until the plane was airborne before making his move. That's when he handed flight attendant Florence Schaffner a note. The note claimed he had a bomb in his brief. This was not a spontaneous act of desperation. Everything about the hijacking of Flight 305 points to planning, meticulous, methodical, and deeply informed. Let's start with the timing. November 24th, Thanksgiving Eve, the busiest travel day of the year. Airports overflowing, airline staff stretched thin, security barely there, no metal detectors, no ID required. A man could buy a ticket with cash and walk straight onto a plane carrying a briefcase bomb, and that's exactly what happened. That date wasn't just convenient, it was strategic. Next, the choice of aircraft. DB Cooper didn't just board any plane, he chose the Boeing 727-100 for a very specific reason. It had an aft stairwell that could be lowered mid-flight, a rare feature. He not only knew about it, he knew how to operate it. He also knew the plane could fly safely at a low altitude and low speed, allowing him to jump without being torn apart by wind. That's not common knowledge. That's training. Possibly military, possibly intelligence. He knew the flight path. He kept the plane over rural terrain, far from major cities or populated areas. He knew the weather conditions, choosing to jump during a rainstorm at night, which would cover his descent and make aerial tracking nearly impossible. Then there's the parachutes, 4 of them. Why not just one? Because asking for 4 created doubt. Authorities believed he might be planning to take a hostage with him, which meant they couldn't risk giving him a rigged or sabotaged chute. They had to give him all working equipment. Clever, calculated. And then comes the real question. Was he really alone? To execute a job like this with such precision, you don't just need knowledge, you need support. Someone to pick the landing zone. Someone to mark a location, stash supplies, or wait with transport. Someone who knew when to be where. Because Cooper wasn't jumping blind. He was jumping towards something. Maybe someone ensured the parachutes were delivered correctly. Maybe someone arranged the untraceable cash-in bundles. Maybe someone was monitoring police radio or airport traffic. This wasn't just one man's fantasy. This was a team, tight, quiet, trained. And DB Cooper, he was just the face of it. And when she hesitated, he opened it just enough to reveal wires, red cylinders, and a battery. It looked convincing. Real or not, it didn't matter. He had control. Cooper's demands were clear. $200,000 in small bills. 4 parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve. A fuel truck waiting in Seattle to refuel the plane. And absolutely no tricks from law enforcement. As Flight 305 circled Seattle, the FBI scrambled to gather the money and parachutes. Passengers were kept unaware of what was happening. Most thought it was a routine delay. Meanwhile, on the ground, agents coordinated a response but made no move to storm the plane. At 5:24 p.m., the aircraft landed at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Cooper exchanged the passengers for the ransom and parachutes. He kept the flight crew aboard. Once the plane refueled, he instructed the pilots to take off again. The destination, Mexico City. But he was very specific about the conditions. Keep the plane under 10,000 feet. Maintain a speed of 170 knots. Landing gear down. Cabin unpressurized. And keep the rear stair mechanism unlocked. The plane took off again just after 7:30 p.m. heading south into the stormy night. Somewhere over southwestern Washington, the cabin crew noticed a shift in air pressure. The rear stair had been lowered. DB Cooper was gone. The FBI launched one of the most extensive manhunts in U.S. history. Military helicopters and ground teams scoured the forests below the flight path. Rivers were searched. Surveillance was increased along the borders. But they found nothing. No parachute, no body, no trace. In 1980, 9 years later, a young boy camping with his family found 3 bundles of weathered $20 bills buried along the Columbia River. They totaled $5,800. The serial numbers matched the ransom money. It was the only physical evidence ever recovered. The rest of the money and the man who took it had vanished. The legend says one man hijacked a plane, jumped into the night, and vanished forever. But when you break down what actually happened, you start to realize this wasn't the work of one man. This was a job that needed precision, timing, and coordination, the kind of execution that only happens when a plan has been rehearsed and reinforced by people working behind the scenes. Let's look at the facts. Cooper jumped into freezing rain in the dark, over rugged wilderness with no GPS, no visible landmarks, and no modern navigation gear. If he truly acted alone, then he parachuted blind into hostile terrain with no way to ensure survival, much less escape. That's not how professionals operate. You need a pickup plan. Someone on the ground who knows the landing zone. A map, a beacon, a hidden vehicle waiting operating near a logging road or river crossing. Even trained paratroopers avoid blind drops without support. And yet, Cooper disappeared cleanly. Not a trace of him. Not a single clear clue. That's not luck. That's extraction. Then there's the cash. 9 years later, a small portion of the ransom money, $5,800, was found buried near the Columbia River. Still bundled. Still intact. But the rest gone. Not spent. Not scattered. Not recovered. That suggests the money didn't get lost. It was taken, hidden, handled by someone who knew how to keep it off the grid. And if Cooper had truly died in the jump, the money would have surfaced eventually. It would have been found near a body or trickled into circulation. Instead, it vanished. That kind of silence suggests help. Let's not forget the preparation. Cooper knew how to pick the plane. He knew the flight altitude and airspeed that would allow a safe jump. He knew the weather patterns, how to avoid radar detection, and how to stall the FBI. He asked for 4 parachutes, not 1, forcing the authorities to hand over real working gear. That knowledge is high level and high risk to carry alone. Someone had to help him run simulations, scout terrain, track flight paths, monitor FBI activity. Even the delivery of the money and parachutes was flawless. Is it possible an insider helped make sure things went according to plan? And then, there's the silence. No accomplice has ever come forward. No leaked names. No whispered betrayals. That takes discipline. Maybe military. Maybe criminal. Maybe something else entirely. But one thing is clear. Cooper may have jumped out of that plane by himself. But he was never alone. For decades, the FBI operated under one guiding belief. D.B. Cooper was a lone man who executed a risky crime and vanished, either by skill or sheer luck. And at face value, it made sense. Only one person was seen boarding the plane. Only one man handed the note, showed the bomb, and made the demands. There were no signs of accomplices, no strange activity at the airport, no suspicious vehicles spotted near the suspected landing area. Just one man, acting with control and confidence. From the moment the plane took off, the hijacking was completely contained inside the aircraft. No one else communicated with Cooper. No outside coordination was detected. The passengers never saw anything suspicious. To the FBI, this looked like a classic one-man job. Then there's the physical evidence, or lack of it. When the FBI searched the flight afterward, they recovered only Cooper's tie clip and the handwritten note. No tools, no tech, no sign that he was working with anyone else. Years later, they found trace DNA on the tie, but it never led to a suspect, and it didn't suggest the presence of multiple people. The Bureau also leaned on behavioral analysis. Cooper's demeanor suggested a solitary operator, calm, self-assured, and in total control. He never consulted anyone. He never hesitated. He managed every moment of the heist himself. Then there's the parachute error. One of the reserve chutes given to him was a non-functional training dummy, and he took it anyway. The FBI saw this as a clear sign Cooper might not have known what he was doing. A seasoned jumper would have noticed instantly. Add in his clothing, a suit, trench coat, and dress shoes, and it further painted a picture of someone unprepared for a dangerous parachute landing in the wilderness. All this led the FBI to a simple conclusion. He acted alone. He took a massive risk, and he probably didn't survive the jump. Their theory? Cooper's body is still out there somewhere, lost to the terrain, his story ending not with a clean escape but with a silent fall into the forest. No accomplices, no extraction, just one man against impossible odds. And the myth he left behind. For decades, the legend of D.B. Cooper has been sold as a solo act. One man in a suit, one jump, one mystery. But when you lay out the facts, that story starts to fall apart. Because this wasn't just a hijacking, it was an operation. Every move was precise. Every demand was calculated. Every detail accounted for. The type of aircraft, the speed, the altitude, the flight path, all chosen with purpose. That's not luck. That's a blueprint. And yet, the FBI focused entirely on a single man theory. Not because they proved he was alone, but because it was easier to believe that he was. They never officially pursued a crew theory. No task force was formed to investigate coordinated support. No surveillance records were cross-checked for possible accomplice vehicles near the projected landing zones. No airport insiders were seriously questioned for planting real parachutes or providing flight information. Why? Because the moment you admit this was a team, you have to admit something far more dangerous. That a group of people pulled off the perfect crime, right under federal surveillance, and not a single one of them cracked. That's not just a failure. That's a cover-up in denial. And maybe that's why the FBI quietly closed the case in 2016, without answers, without suspects, without resolution. Because admitting that Cooper had help would mean reopening every lead, every witness interview, every buried file. It would mean confronting the possibility that this wasn't just a hijacking, it was a covert operation, a trained team, a vanishing act performed with military precision. And if that's true, then we've been chasing a ghost while the crew disappeared behind the curtain. A lone man jumping into the dark, that's a story. But a crew executing a flawless extraction and staying silent for over 50 years, that's something else entirely. That's power, that's planning, that's forbidden. So we'll ask you, was DB Cooper a rogue mastermind, or the face of something much larger, something we were never meant to uncover? Drop your theory in the comments below. And if you enjoyed peeling back the layers of this unsolved mystery, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another episode of Forbidden Truths and Mysteries. Because in stories like this, the most dangerous truths are the ones buried in silence.